Okay, so this is the coolest video I think I've ever gotten to make. Thanks to Square Enix and Eidos Montreal, I got to be one of the first people to get a hands-on preview of their hotly anticipated fall title, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Fair warning, this video is probably going to have a lot of gushing, because, spoilers, I loved it.
Too many seats, not enough butts.
Seems more efficient this way anyway.
Sure, till the world mind sneezes and suddenly you got no life support.
That is a precarious system.
It doesn't work that way. He's exaggerating.
Am I? I heard a bunch of gold domes on Eidos starved because some ones and zeros made WorldMind hard lock the facility.
There's no Nova Core facility on Eidos.
Not anymore.
Hey, while I've got you here, would you mind taking a quick second to like, comment, and subscribe? Those are all free ways to support the content that I make here. And if you want to support my content even more, check the description for links to my Twitch and my Twitter, which are other places where I make stuff. So for the preview, I was dropped into Chapter 5 of the Guardians story, which I'm told is about 4 hours in, and immediately, things were just about as weird as you'd expect them to be in a Guardian's tale.
Chew, move over. What are you looking at?
Oh no, you ain't chewing through any more of my ship.
My ship!
Shoo, flock off!
The mission started on the Milano, which is the Guardian ship, and the way I understand it, that's going to be the case for most missions in the game. That way, the player can choose to interact as much or as little as they want with the environment and the Guardians before they go out to combat and puzzles and things like that.
Peter Quill, spar with me.
I think I'll pass, Drax. I don't want to get tired before the real fight.
Tired, but this is the warm-up.
Not a bad idea. We don't know what's gonna happen when we get out of hyperspace. What if we get ambushed?
That's what guns are for.
Ugh, guns.
I think I preferred when you two didn't get along.
Being who I am, I tried to have as many interactions on the ship as I could before I left, so I talked with all the Guardians, I stopped and talked to Rocket and had him
Now,
craft
Quill,
things for me.
After everything that just... Fine. I'm only doing this because I'm nicer than you.
I even stopped to pet Cammy, the space llama, who happens to be on the Guardian ship. More about that in a little bit. But the conversations really surprised me with their depth. A lot of them were about pain and betrayal and loss and things like that. And I found myself wrapped up in the story almost immediately.
I see you have discovered my criminal record.
You can tell that they put a lot of love into making every single one of the Guardians feel like living, breathing members of the family. And the same level of love and same level of detail was put into their home, the Milano. I found more things to interact with on the Milano than I honestly had time for. I felt like I was running out of time in my playthrough by having all these conversations, so I can't wait to get my hands on the full game and take as much time as I need to. Not to mention the fact that I managed to find a few Marvel Universe Easter eggs hiding around the ship as well. Like I said though, I couldn't spend my entire time just wandering around the Milano looking at everything there was to look at, so after taking a second to check in on Cammy, that space llama that the Guardians either captured or rescued and couldn't seem to get rid of, I headed off to the mission. The developers called this chapter the Scooby-Doo chapter because it's where the Guardians first start to uncover the central mystery of the game. And it all takes place on a Nova Core base called the Rock.
Same designation as before. It's definitely Hal's Hope.
Apparently, in the section before I got to play, the Guardians incurred some kind of fine with the Nova Core, and even though Rocket doesn't want to, the Guardians decide to pay it. Except, the Nova Core base seems to be deserted. Like, eerily deserted. I said this was the Scooby-Doo moment of the game, right? So it was up to me, with the help of the Guardians, to figure out just what was going on.
Ooh, spooky. Hello?
Oh, the look on both your faces. A bunch of babies. Oh, you were too.
Are these?
Centurion Armor!
Yup. Feel free to try one on, Quill.
A true warrior requires no armor.
You wouldn't fit in one anyway.
To wear armor is to expect failure.
For real? Can I try one?
If you want to get fried to a puddle of goo, each one is gene-coded by the World Mind.
Are you saying the World Mind has the genetic code of every Nova Centurion?
Yup. Word is, the bugs tried to use that against them in the war. But that's one supercomputer you can't hack. Believe me, I tried. Ah, no wonder the door's all jorked out. The rotor won't stop spinning.
Alright, let's hope that holds.
In-game, Star-Lord's visor helps you solve puzzles, putting your camera in a mode that I can probably best describe as something like detective mode from the Arkham games. Objects of interest are highlighted for you, and if you scan them, you can get more information and even lore. At this point in the chapter, I was presented with a puzzle that I had to solve. So I used my visor, I worked with the help of the Guardians, and solved the puzzle. A little fun fact, the puzzle in this section actually had an alternate solution that, if you went that route, unlocked some additional loot. And that loot was a different costume for Drax. This is probably as good a time as any to tell you that there are additional outfits for all of the Guardians, and all of them that I got to see were pretty cool. I can even tell you that I saw at least one MCU-inspired costume. So I have a feeling we're going to see MCU costumes for all of the Guardians. Another quick cool thing about the costumes, by the way. All of the additional costumes have their own story, and the ones that are inspired by comics list what comics they come from and who wrote and did the art for those comics. I thought that was really neat. So if I love the costume, I could go find the origin of it. But back to the mystery. After the Guardians make their way through the locked door, they find even more empty halls and rooms. They find, honestly, more questions than they do answers. They even find a prisoner of the Nova Corps that you can interact with and choose to free. Or maybe not.
There! You hear that? So we're just gonna ignore all that racket?
We don't need to get dragged into someone else's problems right now.
At least we agree on that. If it ain't got nothing to do with getting my ship back, I don't care.
My ship.
I'm honestly hoping the game is stuffed full of interactions like these. Now, I'm not 100% sure, but I swear I found on one of the terminals on the rock little tidbits of a space-themed romance novel. So when you get your hands on the game, if you like these kinds of interactions and these kinds of little pieces of lore, make sure you check out everything, because you have no idea what you're going to find.
I found this.
So at this point, you find an object and you interact with it, and here's where I got my first real choice that affected the outcome of what happened next.
75% acceptance rate. It is as she promised. Have faith. The promise will be made real. Proceed to Sector 7. With faith.
Well, the good news is we're not alone. There's lots of chatter.
Tell them I want my ship back.
My ship.
I sense there's a bet.
But it sounds like they're searching for something or someone.
Could explain why no one's around.
Who gives a flark? Tell them to get their golden butts up here.
The promise will be made real. Proceed to Sector 7. With...
Hey there. Is this thing on? We're looking for Centurion Carell.
Who is we?
We're the Guardians of the Galaxy. We were supposed to meet Centurion Carell to pay a fine.
Hello, Guardians of the Galaxy. I would be more than happy to assist you today.
Based on the fact that the game popped up a message that said the Guardians didn't think it was the best idea that I chose that, I think I chose wrong. But either way, it was time for combat. And the combat surprised me. The first 30 minutes or so of my playthrough was quiet and reserved. The most action I saw in that time was shooting events so Rocket had access to it. The rest of that time was puzzles and conversations with the team. So when the combat came in fast-paced and frenetic, I was not ready. The combat, as you've probably seen from already released trailers and gameplay clips, is based on fighting while telling the Guardians what they should be doing and who they should be attacking. Your Guardians have a lot of abilities that you're encouraged to use often and in interesting and new combinations to defeat your enemies. I'll admit, it took me a few tries to get used to. Fighting and dodging and moving around the battlefield while telling 4 other characters what they should be doing took me some time to get right. But when it worked really, really well. The low cooldowns on their abilities meant that I was encouraged to use their skills often, and seeing Drax fly in to ground slam some enemies or Groot wrap an enemy up in vines never got old. It was always exciting. All of the Guardians seem to have specialties. Gamora does the highest single target damage, Rocket is good at AoE from a distance, Groot immobilizes enemies, and Drax does the most stagger damage. Put all of those things together and combine them in new and interesting ways to think about all of the combat possibilities that gives you. All of the enemies have different weaknesses, by the way, and I'm told that the idea behind the combat is once you fought an enemy, you should have a plan A for fighting that enemy. But then they put those enemies in different combinations, so that way you have to throw out your plan A and move on to your plan B or plan C, which feels very Guardians of the Galaxy, doesn't it? I'll admit that in trying to get a feel for this and trying to see what all the Guardians could do, I died more than a few times. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish the demo section in time, because I died that many times. But there is a mechanic in the game, kind of like an ultimate ability, that surprised me and could have helped in those situations. That mechanic is called the Huddle, and what it does when you call a huddle is all the Guardians gather around for a pep talk from Star-Lord. The player in this moment has to gauge the Guardians' attitudes and decide what type of pep talk they need to get the combat going. If the player chooses the correct pep talk, all of the Guardians will have reduced cooldowns. If not, at least Star-Lord still will. The Huddle is recharged with something called Momentum, a stat based on those adjectives you see flashing on the screen during combat. Incredible, amazing, stuff like that. And by the way, that in-game scoreboard, it's explained in the story. Apparently Rocket snuck in and installed that scoreboard on Star-Lord's visor, so when we're seeing it, he's seeing it too. So after waves of combat, some of them harder than others, the chapter that I got to play ends with what the developers are calling a comsel, or a combat puzzle. And in this section, you have to fight off hordes of enemies while trying to make your escape. Which sounds exactly the way you would expect a Guardian story to go. And speaking of classic Guardian stuff, the music in the game is a big deal. Not only does it play while you're fighting, the music also influences the pep talks that Star-Lord gives in the huddles. On top of all that, the developers actually put together a band called Star-Lord in real life to make music for the soundtrack. There's a whole lot I'm not telling you, like some of the Easter eggs I found, or who attacks the Guardians on the rock. But I don't want to tell you everything. Trust me when I say, it's better if you get to play it for yourself. So, overall impressions. The combat is fast and fun, and I think it's going to take more time to figure out than I had in my hands-on preview. I've really never played anything like this, so I'm looking forward to playing more of it. As for the story and the world, well, I only really got a very little piece of it, but the piece I got left me hungry for more. I want to know who took over the Nova Corps base, what they want, and just what the heck is going on with that Space Llama Cammy. The art is beautiful and detailed. The costumes that I got to see were fun and interesting and looked like they were taken straight from comics and movies. The choices that I had to make actually affected the game as I was playing it. With all of that combined, I don't know why I wouldn't play this game. I can't wait to get my hands on Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Thanks for watching.